In 91, we had a lot of small groups within the core that were close to each other, but an entity, we might not have had as close a membership as we had in some other years. Um, I look back to 1988. The people who had marched in the core the year before me had been the ones who made finals for the first time. They were close. They were people that I looked up to and respected. When we went into 1992, Chris, I think we talked, and Jeff, um, about how can we be like that group that mentored us? How can we be that group that is welcoming and accepting to the new members because there were so many youngsters? Um, how can we be leaders?
For me, it looked like a brand new start in a lot of ways. We had new uniforms that year. It was our 20th anniversary. Can we make things different, and what kind of things can we do? And eventually getting to the point where we talked about the silver penny. And I remember, I'm pretty sure, Andy, you were the one about with the shoelace and how the way to tie it.
At some point, at the time that several of us moved in prior to tour starting, we were hanging out at what was then Walsh College. In the evenings, we would sit around and talk about ways to make things more unified. There had been discussions even back in 91 about what other corps did, um, that were parts of their traditions and things that, being a recent DCI finalist, we hadn't evolved into yet. How were the Bluecoats going to do something? And I mean, we were playing music of the Beatles, so Penny Lane was an inspiration. The idea of 91 of a penny actually, I believe, had come up with you, Chris, or with somebody, because it had the year on it, and you could memorialize the year that you marched by the year on the penny.
Right, and I do think the difference there in '92, like Andy was saying, was that it was born out of some discussions. So there had been some seeds that were planted, and I remember it was back in '91 that the drum major came around to us and was talking about Cavaliers and their gizmo, Spirit and the Deltas, and whomever else, that they had these things that they would do. Cavaliers also have the initiation. So what would be our initiation? And nobody liked that. That wasn't, and I think that helped keep it from getting anywhere in '91. And then with Chris and Andy in '92, it was more like, and I will underscore what they were both saying. It was such a young core. There were so many new people that I think there was inherent understanding that we had to be careful with what we were doing because we didn't want to scare these people away. When they came up with that idea, to me, I see it now as twofold. Not only was it a great idea, like they just said, in terms of bringing the family and some of these traditions or creating that tradition in there, but secondarily, it was a way to introduce all these new people into what it was to be a Bluecoat.
But this, with the pennies, it felt like something that, like the cogs for the Cavaliers, like it shows how many years you marched, and then you had to earn that. And that was one of the things that we decided to do for rookies is like, look, we just don't want to give you something. One of the things I was always impressed upon me is like how tour was and how like brutal it could be at times, how great it could be, but you had to go through the collective experience of a year to kind of say that you fully marched and you earned that right. And that was one of the things that we decided to do with rookies is that we weren't going to exclude them. They got a shoelace, but at the end of the year, when we got the finals, they got their penny.
So it was a sense of accomplishment, but also, like Jeff said, planting a seed, that more was to come. Also, I remember driving around Canton on our time off in somebody's borrowed car, with $2 in my wallet, going to all kinds of banks trying to get 200 1992 pennies, and they weren't in distribution yet. So we couldn't electroplate them and give them to the rookies because we couldn't get them.
I think also something that kind of happened during my years was the nickel. And so they started actually giving out nickels at that point. because of people that had been around that long. And also another side note, a lot of girls in the color guard would carry around clear nail polish the entire summer long so that we could paint our pennies clear nail polish on day right after we get them to keep the silver plating from rubbing off.
I think it was a surprise to me when the shoelace part of the tradition happened that particular year. I don't remember knowing much about it, but I definitely remember that ceremony after the first show. So that was my first, or that to my recollection, that was my first kind of experience with the tradition. And I do remember where we were. We were in West Jefferson, Ohio, near Columbus, and where we were camped out for I think about a week before the first show. So
I did like know of the pennies. I didn't know like what they meant, but I knew that if I saw someone with a shoelace and a penny around their neck, they like meant business. So like going into 2020, I knew that I would get a penny. I didn't know what the process of like the shoelace and the penny thing was, and I didn't even know that after 2020 either, because in 2020 we got our shoelace and our penny mailed to us without like a real ceremony. We had like one over Zoom, but it wasn't really the same, you know, because we didn't have that like spring training to go through, and we didn't have that finals day to get our penny at. And the pennies that year were painted over black, so I don't have my pennies on me right now, but that penny is just like a solid black penny.
So actually listening to the history and like, it was really cool learning where it came from. Like it felt very, very genuine. So that was super cool for me. And that whole day was awesome. Like that whole presentation. And when we woke up finals morning, it felt really surreal because having like March 2020 when we got our pennies mailed to us and we just kind of like, oh, I have this, but I don't know if it didn't really feel like I had earned it, even though I had been contracted. So when we actually got to pass them out and just watch everyone come up, it was really cool. So.
But when we started to have more and more international students, they started to bring over coins of their own and distribute those to the Corps too, which I think was a very cool kind of addition to the tradition. So, you know, Japanese students, students that may have come over from Europe or other parts of Asia or Canada would bring in their currency, and so members would get that along with the U.S. pennies. Now, what I don't know exactly, because I'll be honest with you, with a tradition like this, when I was a director, I tried to be as hands off as I could in terms of, other than making sure that we scheduled the time to happen, for it to happen, and also making sure that we got the pennies plated, which
we were trying to figure out how we can do this because we didn't want to ask Ted or anyone to, basically do the work for us and they go nowhere. So, yeah, it was just, it became so obvious after we got so far. I just remember just going, oh, that's great. Like it just kind of fell into place. And that was the nice thing about it.
And it was the type of thing that could have lasted a year and we would have been happy with that.
The other piece that just organically came into play there was the fact that, again, there was so many new people. They didn't have any understanding that, oh, this should just be a one-year tradition. It was something that for them, their first year, look what happened here. Well, of course, we're going to want to bring this on. And I mean, we always have to acknowledge that rookie group in '92, I mean, that was a special group. I mean, how many of those people went on to March 4, 5, 6 years? So they were, it was a huge impression upon them that we had no idea. And so it was very, I mean, the timing was perfect, like you guys said.
Yeah, I'm just really thrilled. Like 92, I can't even imagine back then that this is still a tradition, and it's amazing. And I'm so happy to see that it's taken on different forms, that what it is today. So like if I go to a drum corps show, I don't get to go often, and I see Bluecoats and I see pennies, I'm like, that's awesome. I can't believe they're still being handed out, and they're meaningful and they're important to the Corps. So thank you.